Hey everybody, it's Rory from A&S Gear, and today we're going to learn how to do some general maintenance on your paintball markers. Alright, so here's our mini GS. I'm going to go ahead and pull off the parts that don't really influence much of what we're trying to do here. So barrel, we'll get this out of the way. Get the detents off. We'll get the front grip and the regular grips off. Just get all the extra stuff out of the way. If the detents ever get stuck or sticky and don't want to come off, you can take a soft mallet or a plastic mallet and just tap them and they'll come off nice and easy. All right, a couple differences between the GS and the Mini. Obviously the front grip is completely different. The Regulator, same kind of idea with the Reg, but it's an on-off version and it's a much smaller version. So we'll take all that apart, get the front apart, body apart. Just talk about some basic problems that you might run into. Well, the two major problems that people always seem to have with these guns, or this style of gun. I shouldn't say these guns, but the Mini, the Axe Pro, the Mini GS. All right, so here we go. Guns bare, basically. You've got your battery, your front grip, frame, trigger, body, bolt, and feed neck ASA. So let's get everything off the gun that is important now. I guess the other parts would be important, but not as important. Don't need that one. These are our two frame screws. And this rear frame screw works the same way that the standard Mini one does, where it goes up through the frame, up through the transfer plate and into the body, and it actually helps hold the bolt in place when it is inside the gun. So with that, we should be able to remove this. Here's our bolt. We've got our bolt guide, our bolt, and our bolt spring. Just like this whole series of guns, the bolt spring does need to go on in a certain direction. You should have resistance when putting it on. If you can just easily slide it through, then it's the wrong way. So turn it around. It should go in and then it should snap in at the bottom, just like that. If you were to pull on the front, you should be able to pull the bolt right off without the spring coming off. That's not always like that, but pretty rare, or pretty often. 2 O-rings on the bolt. That just helps seal it when it's moving forward and to get it to move forward. 3 O-rings on the bolt guide. 1 O-ring that is right here. It's more like a bumper, so you really don't ever need to change that one. And then O-ring, O-ring, O-ring on the bolt itself. Now, the common problem that you'll see with the bolt, or with common problem, is when the gun just leaks down the breech or the feed neck. You can hear it slowly leaking, or sometimes it's rapidly leaking. And that is typically caused by the cup seal inside here. So let's go ahead and take that out. Remove our velocity adjuster all the way. And then we can push our cup seal out through the front. And we have our cup seal, our piston, our spring, and then the actual face, the cup seal itself. There is a little hole inside here. See it right against there. Not the hole in the outside of the guide, but actually on the inside. It's the hole that you're looking through right down there right now. This seals that hole up. So it comes up and it will, there it goes. It'll block that entire hole right there and keep the air or the volume of air in the chamber back here. When it opens up, it lets that volume out, and that's what causes the ball to shoot. Very basic explanation there. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but if you have a leak coming down the bolt or through the feed neck, it's typically because this face does not seal properly against that hole right there. So part of this is not keeping the air back, and air is able to leak past it and leak down the front of the gun. So if that's the case, you can try two things. You can completely close your velocity adjuster, so turn it all the way in till it bottoms out. You don't need to crank on it, just till it stops, and then see if that solves the leak. If it does, you're probably okay. It could be that this was just stuck in a position that it didn't close all the way. If that doesn't solve the problem, you most likely need to replace this right here, and you have extras of these in your parts kit, or you can buy them if you've already gone through them. But pretty easy fix right there for those. All right. That's closed. I'm going to back it up just a little bit because it doesn't need to be all the way closed. Okay, moving on to there. Let's get the frame and the body separated. Oh, forgot one up here. So we've already got our two, our middle and rear frame screw out. Take this one. And then that should free this whole thing up. All right, so unlike the Mini, which uses a magnetic field sensor to count trigger pulls, this actually has a true micro switch in it. So it's easier to set these triggers up, and it's harder to get them out of position so that they don't work. So a better system inside of there with the Mini GS, I think. Let's set this to the side for now. And we'll just focus on this. So here we have our solenoid and our upper transfer tube. There, move that over here, take our solenoid off. Solenoid is rebuildable. You can remove these top three screws and take the whole top end out. And then underneath is the armature, which you would just need to wipe down and put it back together. You don't need to grease it or do anything special to it. Just needed to keep it clean. And always, I was gonna say, as usual, check the O-rings. There's an O-ring here, an O-ring here, and an O-ring on the underside that we'll look at. And just make sure that they look okay, that they're not damaged in any way, which would cause a leak. There's an O-ring on the bottom there. Sometimes this O-ring, when you take this top housing off, this O-ring doesn't actually sit right there. There's a recessed groove on this side that the O-ring actually sits in, but it sticks to this top section sometimes. So if it does, you'll make sure you want to remove it and put it into its appropriate groove on the solenoid there, so that when the cap goes back on, the O-ring sits in the groove properly. If you leave it here and just try to stick it back on, there's a good chance that that O-ring won't go back into that that slot, and it will leak or have a problem. Or you can throw it on the floor and lose it. So I just lost that O-ring somewhere. Ah, it's on the floor. Found it. So when I pulled out the armature right here, I caught the edge of the O-ring like that, and it just popped it right out of there. So it's, I wouldn't recommend taking this apart if you're sitting at your bench at the paintball field. Make sure that you have a clean space where you can find parts should they drop on the floor, like mine did. All right, so let's get this thing back out of here. And let you look at it. See, you've got a brass top to it. You've got one sealing face and then another sealing face right there. So the brass is always going to go at the top. And that's what's going to seal up against here. Goes in like that, and it seals. And this larger face at the bottom seals at the bottom of the solenoid. But you just need to wipe it down. You don't need to put grease on it or anything like that. Just keep it clean. All right, back together, back together, back together. All right, moving on. So let's get all these set screws out of here. And this will let us take our transfer plate out. Okay. Now once you've undone all the screws, depending on how long how long it's been since you took your garden apart last, it might be a little difficult to separate. Sometimes they like to stick together. You're just going to kind of work around the outside of it, slowly prying up the edges until you can get it to come apart. Kind of like that. I like to keep all my screws in there so that I don't lose them. Then in here we've got our board with our micro switch. We have our gasket, and then we have our flow restrictor. Flow restrictor is important to have in there. It does go only in the second hole back, so it doesn't go in this one or in this one. It just goes in the middle, and it goes with the large open end facing, well, depending on how you look at this. If you look at it like a gun would be standing up, it faces down, but you put the restricted end in first. So when you're looking at it, you see the large open end facing back at you. If you do need to get this gasket out, be very gentle with it. Don't poke it or cut it or nick it or anything like that. Just comes out like this and sits nicely back in there. And just kind of push it down with your finger, keep it in place. The board, we pop this out. We've got our eye sensors right here. They do flex, or I should say they are movable, but they are metal. So if you move them enough, they will break. So if they are slightly bent in or out, or you pull it out and you slightly bend them, not a big deal. You just gently move them back, and then you can put them in. If you break paint in the gun, make sure you clean the eyes and clean the slots that the eyes sit in. If you just clean the eyes and then you stick the eyes back in, they'll get covered in paint again. So do yourself a favor, clean the slots out where they sit before putting the eyes back in so that they work properly. Sometimes the eye board won't want to go in, so you need to adjust the eyes a little bit so that they slide in easy. And then the switch, we don't need to worry about that too much like in the Mini, where you've got a magnet and sensors and all sorts of junk. It's a much simpler system, the way it should be. When you're putting these screws in to this body, I've seen pretty rare or regularly where you go to if you just try to screw them in, that they don't want to go down. I always back my screws up a little bit before I turn them in. That way I know the thread starts properly and it won't strip or cross thread or anything like that. But it seems to happen in these bodies more than any. Just a good rule of thumb really for any screw that you're putting in is to turn it back until you feel it click and then go ahead and thread it in. All right, so there's our body right there. Back together. If we needed to take the trigger out, we knock the pin out, and just like in the Mini, one side is knurled, so you need to make sure it goes out the direction of the knurling. Don't pass the knurling through the body, knurling side first. If you're wondering what knurling means or is, if you look at the side right here, you'll see all these little, it's like rough edges to it. That's to help grip against the metal and keep it from popping out by itself. So we don't want to pass that through. Knock that out of there. Let's get the grip off here. Grip screw. These actually are a larger one. I wish they would just make up their mind and use all the same screws. Now also this has a hardwired battery terminal in, so it unlike the Mini that uses like a wire and then a pad that you connect to this, you just put these connectors inside here. And then we need to, I might as well just dump those both out. We need to disconnect this from here with yet another Allen key. All right, so here's our board. This is just basically the cover that the board sits in, and the battery goes right there. There is a rubber gasket that is right here. Our button to turn the gun on and off is right there. So we just push on this rubber button, and that rubber button pushes against this button, and it turns on and off. Pretty simple. Without this gasket though, it's not hard to do. You just have to stick like a stick or something down in there to get it to turn on. So don't lose it. It really does serve a purpose. Leave it there. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the regulator out and talk about that for a minute. First thing I'm going to do is remove the lower transfer tube. Put that over there to the side. There's two screws inside here. One is a set screw and one is like a button head. So we're going to remove both of those. The set screw at the back uses a smaller size Allen key than the button head, and these can be tricky sometimes depending on where the thread ends and how you can actually get a hold of it. You might have to go from different sides all the way around. Once you get it moving a little bit, go ahead and back it up. That's why a ball end Allen key really is helpful. You can see that's just a very long set screw. And then this button head. Put that there. And then that can slide right off. So before, on the Mini, we had this bracket could slide back and forth, and then it had posts coming up, and then you had to have a screw come through the side, and it just left a lot of room for error. This setup right here makes it a lot easier with just two screws that hold it in place and make sure that this is nice and tight against here. Again, though, I will take my O-ring and I'll always leave it on there when I set this up to begin with, so I know that the O-ring fits properly inside there. All right, so that's your whole frame right there, besides your trigger, which we really don't need to move or take out at this point. So the regulator right here. Regulator breaks down pretty similar to the other one. The cap comes off. On this one, you don't need, or there's no set screw that keeps the cap from accidentally rotating off. We still have the spring, the plate. It goes on like that. The plate goes the same way with the pointed side facing down. And then you have your piston in here that again will not come out. It should just rotate around. You can try to unscrew it all you want and it won't come out of there. We've also got an on-off lever that we need to deal with. So we need to, I usually do it from the off position. So I flip the lever back and then I will take the lever out. I like to hold on to the lever though when you remove this screw so you don't lose any parts, because there is a spring underneath here. So you don't want to lose any of that. So we've got that and that. These two pieces do come apart. So our spring, and this would kind of be the ramp that activates the pin on the inside. When this pushes down on it, this goes down and pushes the pin out. From here, you need a special tool. So you can get these, they do sell them. This is meant to fit the core right inside here, so it marries up with the grooves that are on that core on the inside. Without this piece, it is pretty hard to get these cores out because you end up ruining the copper, or the brass that's inside there. So I'm going to use this. You could use anything you want to stick through this. Allen key, a punch, whatever it happens to be, to get that out. All right, so there's our top right there. So this is basically the cap or the assembly inside there. Now the easiest way to get this insert out, or this brass piece inside there, if you just bang it on the table, it most likely will not come out of there. So what I do is I take my Allen key and I put it in the same hole that the lever came out of right here. And I just kind of push everything backwards. And then I can get it out of there. So certain versions of this, you'll find two separate pieces. This piece with the holes in it is not attached to this piece right here. And certain ones you will. So it's kind of hit and miss however you see those in there. But that's your whole piece right there. You've got an O-ring right here, here, and here. This O-ring on this face, if you have a leak that is coming through the regulator, like down through the flip lever, it's typically right there, that O-ring. So check that one, or replace this one as well right here. This is a weird metric size O-ring, which you probably won't ever need to replace, but if you do, this isn't in your parts kit. You'll have to find that O-ring. Maybe you can order it direct from them. All right, so now we've got all the guts out except for the reg seat. If you have a reg that is overpressurizing consistently, or it is creeping, or you're getting weird shoot down issues, it could be the piston or the reg seat inside of here. So you're going to need something like an Allen key that you can put into the hole that's on this piston right here. Like that. Because we want to keep this piece from rotating. And then you're going to need this tool also. It's a socket. And I believe that this is like a 3mm socket. It's made in Germany. You know it's got to be good. So we're going to take this, we're going to put it inside here, we're going to lock it onto the post that's in there, and then we're going to keep this brass ring from rotating by holding it in place in that slot, and then we're going to unscrew the post out. If we don't hold on to this piece, it'll just rotate with the post typically. So that's out. Our post came out right there. Our cup seal is sitting down inside of there. I want to see if I can get it out without damaging it in any way. We don't want to ruin it. So the cup seal itself, or I shouldn't say the cup seal, I keep calling it that. It's really not a cup seal. Yeah, kind of it is. It's your reg seat. So this top side of the reg seat is concave. The back side is flat. So we want the post to go through the concave side so that it seals properly. You can see that the post is tapered also. So when those two come together, the concave with the taper, it creates an airtight seal right there, and then air can't get past it. If air does get past it, that's when your regulator starts to overpressurize or supercharge or have issues. From there, since they are not connected anymore, we can push this piston out. Then we have another spring right there. So the softer, squishy spring goes around this. The harder, thicker spring goes in the cap. So we don't want to get those backwards, otherwise our reg won't work properly. So let's put it back together. Spring in our piston goes in there. Cup seal, darn it. Reg seat and post. I'm going to go together. I'm going to turn it until I feel, well, I see this thing start spinning. Watch. There it goes. Now I'm going to grab a hold of it, keep it from moving, and tighten that down. Done with that. Let's put our core back together. So obviously the pin is right here. So we want our pin to stick out like that. So this is what's going to push against our tank. And this needs to go inside like this, so that when this gets pushed down like that, the pin comes out. And when it pops back up, the pin goes back in. Just like that, over and over and over again, every time you flip your lever on and off. So we need the core, or the pin, to stick out the back, because that's where our tank is going to go. So this goes in that way. But we need to make sure that this opening right here, which is where the pin needs to come through the top, is accessible through here. So let's kind of line it up as we're putting it in there. And then we should see it, which we do, right through there. I'm going to take this Allen key again and I'm going to push it all the way back so that it sits completely flush against the back. And then I'm going to make sure that I can move the post forward, which I can, and you can see it, kind of see it, right down in there. Now we need to put this in and put the whole thing back together. We can do it one of two ways. We could drop this down in here, and we could put the top back on, and then we can put the core all together. I typically put the rest of the core together, and then I finish with the lever. So when I do that, that's the next size down. If I don't put something inside here, when I tighten this down, the whole core is going to rotate on the inside. And then the hole that I need this lever to go through will not be there anymore. So I need to put something in there so that when I tighten this cap on, my core doesn't rotate. And even then, I might need to adjust it slightly. So putting that in, I'm going to tighten this up. And look in there, and it looks like it really hasn't changed much, which hopefully is good. So let's go put our core in, our lever. And again, we took it off in the off position. So let's put it back together in the off position. It will make it easier, trust me. You don't have to push as hard to compress the spring down in there. And then we're going to activate it. And then we're going to undo it. And I should be able to reach inside. After I've activated and the pin has come out, I should be able to reach or deactivate it or degas it, reach in, and easily push the pin back. If when I reach in and try to push that pin down, it is very, very stiff and very hard to move, that's because my core rotated when I was tightening it down with this piece. And I need to back it up ever so slightly so that piece can move up and down easily inside there, and it doesn't get stuck, which causes our pin to get stuck. But this one is moving very, very easily, so everything is nice and straight and in line inside there. Piston spring, a reg spring, cap, turn the right direction, and then tighten down on there. Now this can go back together on here. First thing we want to do is install our transfer tube. And we're going to bring it up because these slide on now. Before where they kind of lock together like this, now these slide together. So we want to have this high enough up to where the O-ring doesn't get clipped or pinched on here. And it should slide easily forward. And then I can come back down just enough to keep this from wanting to move and slide off. And then I can go ahead and put my pins back or my screws back in. So I'm going to get this first one started. Right there. And I know this is set right now, so I'm going to move this out of the way. It's right where I want it to be. My O-ring is set properly inside there. And then I can put this screw in as well. All right. Put our cap back on. And if you've been maneuvering this and flipping it around to look at all this stuff on here, just take a peek inside there and make sure your O-ring hasn't shifted or come all the way out and maybe fallen out and you didn't realize it. And then just snug that up. There. Let's put our front back on, or our grip. This is our screw that holds our board in place. There. Now we've got these two which come in from the front. lots of different screws in this gun. Okay, then we have that one. These two top ones, which complete the assembly of the front grip to the frame. All right, now we can finish the body. I always put the solenoid on first. It's easier to turn it without having the transfer plate or the upper transfer tube in the way. Transfer tube. If you have a leak in the middle of your frame right here, check this O-ring on your transfer tube. It's usually the culprit. And then we want to make sure that these 8 pins that you see inside here go into the 8 holes on the board up here. You don't want it to be offset where you only get 6 in there, or the front 4 go in and the rear 4 don't. So you can actually see it. I'm still looking at it. You can see it inside there, right up there. And I can see all the pins lining up with their holes. So I'm comfortable in pushing it together at that point. Now I'm just going to do the middle frame screw. I'm not going to put the rear one in because I won't be able to get the bolt in if I do. Front one. Now let's see here. There we go. Then the bolt's going to go in. There is a guide cut right at the bottom there. You can see that little circle. We have a little pin on the bottom of our bolt. Want to make sure that those line up and go together. Like that. And then we can put that rear frame screw in. All right. From here, it's just putting the rubber pieces back on and our detents. There. There. And we're not going to tighten everything down yet. We just want to get these screws started. But don't tighten them down because it will make it easier to put the other side on. If you tighten them all down, it'll make it much harder to stretch the grips around and line up the holes on the other side. Ooh. Almost done. Two more. Barrel. And there's our mini GS. Well guys, I hope this helps you out with any questions or concerns you have about your paintball gear or products. And as always, for all your paintball needs, shop ansgear.com.